What is up, gang? Welcome back to another episode of Inspired By, a series where we look at the musical trends, past and present, to understand the techniques used so that you guys can make better music. My name's Will, and I make an assortment of music under the moniker Hush Child. Today we're looking at all of the possibilities we have to sidechain in addition to the compressor in Ableton. I think there's going to be a few in here that surprise you. And I'm going to split this video up into three main areas. So use the timestamps below before you go anywhere to make sure that you don't miss anything. The first area is going to be in a context of lo-fi, looking at some of the artists that you guys recognize and how they use sidechain in short, medium, and long form sidechain. Secondly, I'm going to show you all of the devices that have the capabilities to sidechain. And thirdly, I'm going to show you why I use an external device to sidechain my kicks. So if you do learn something new, make sure you hit that like button, comment below what you want to see in future videos, and subscribe, as it greatly helps out the channel. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers, and I thank you so much. So for those that maybe need a little bit of clarity on what sidechain compression is, it's essentially using one instrument to dictate the level of another instrument.
Start counting. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1.
I'm not going to get too sciencey, but that's essentially all it is. For the most part, we take a kick drum and we sidechain it through the compressor to another melodic instrument. And we use the threshold as our main parameter to control how much the music is ducked by. So as we pull down our threshold level, we're going to hear more gain reduction in the music. Let's jump into Ableton and I'll show you some of the ways that we might use sidechain. I tend to think about sidechain compression in kind of three categories. This isn't a rule of thumb, but it helps me break down the ways that the kick and the track may have been processed with these various sidechain methods. So straight off the bat, we've got the quick sidechain. This is a sidechain that in my mind has a very quick release time, between sort of 32nd notes and 16th notes. It's extremely hard to notice that there's any kind of pump action going on with the music, but the key thing to listen out for is it sounds like the music's being quickly muted and the kick is extremely audible. So if we're specifically looking at lo-fi artists, the type of artists that would use this would be producers like 1-2, No Idea, and Fujitsu. Very short, snappy sidechain. So how do we create that? Well, the most obvious way to create that type of sidechain compression is to essentially, like we mentioned in the introduction, open up a compressor and choose this function here and then choose sidechain. From here, you're choosing the audio from and then the kick. And then what you're going to want to do is start to bring down your threshold. So as it stands, your threshold will just be set to 0 dB. There's not really much going on here, but as we bring that threshold down, you start to hear the music duck. And with this particular setting, I had it on about -45 dB, and I had quite a harsh ratio. So to explain this really easily, if we have a ratio of 2:1, for every 2 decibels above the threshold, we're going to reduce our frequency by 1. So if our threshold is set to -10 dB here, we're going to have a gain reduction of -5 decibels. Now, of course, as you expand that ratio, you're going to have a more intense gain reduction, but it's going to be something that you want to experiment with. So let me show you other ways that we can go about using our sidechains. If you wanted to create a similar effect to the first example I played, we can actually use a gate. So we open up our gate and we set the sidechain on, and it's going to be exactly the same as before. Sidechain, audio from, and you choose your kick. Now you're going to want to start to bring that threshold down and experiment with the attack time. The attack is how quickly your sidechain takes effect, and the release is how long or how quickly it takes to resume the regular level when that kick wasn't performing. unique in itself. This opens up some possibilities for us to maybe mute the kick drum and just have like a trance gate kind of effect. When you hit the flip button, it works a lot more similarly to our first example of the sidechain compressor. Most commonly in lo-fi, we hear tracks that have this medium length of sidechain. You can hear this example in music from Evie, Ginsang, Nomadic, and I consider this a sidechain that expands across either a quarter note or a half note margin. Now you'll notice down here that I'm actually using Shaperbox to draw my sidechain, and this is going to be the only plugin that we look at in these examples that doesn't come as a stock plugin with Ableton, but I prefer using Shaperbox over the other forms of sidechain for a very specific reason. Make sure you stick around to find out why that reason is. I use sidechain on pretty much all of my release material, so at that point I want to thank our sponsor DistroKid and share a few quick words from them. Yes, for almost all of my tracks I use sidechain, and when that music's finished up I release it through our sponsor DistroKid. And with DistroKid they make it so easy for you to release your music on all of the major platforms. One of my favorite functions of DistroKid is their tool Splits. I've spoken to you guys about Splits before, but it was previously called Teams. But with the new name change, they've also updated some of the features. Now with Splits, you can even recoup payments ahead of Splits taking effect. For instance, if somebody paid £500 for a beat, you can make sure that that person gets paid first before your other collaborators start to take a piece of the revenue. This is super cool, and I'm not sure that any other platforms are doing that right now. And again, it's one of the main reasons that I love DistroKid. They just keep innovating and taking care of us artists. If you want to start releasing your music with DistroKid, make sure that you use the link in the description below, because you'll get a 7% discount off your first year. Now, without any more interruptions, let's jump back into sidechaining. Now, our final example is obviously going to be the long form of sidechain, something that stretches, between half and a whole bar in length. And we don't hear this example that much. So you'll notice that down here, this form of sidechain is being triggered by the auto filter. And I absolutely love this method of sidechain because it adds a different kind of effect other than just the volume ducking that we've heard before. So to do this, as always, open this up and choose sidechain audio from the kick. But with this, we're going to start with our frequency at its full level. I've just introduced a little bit of the resonance here, so it kind of sweeps the frequency, and then you're going to want to start to pull this frequency down. So you just set where you're going to cap your frequencies, and then with the envelope you're going to reduce this to -127, and then you get this. So you can hear that it's starting from absolute naught and then working its way up to 2.18 kilohertz. If we increase this resonance, you'll hear it sweep the frequency even more. Now you're probably asking, well, what happens if we invert the envelope so it's just at 127? So what happens here, our music is going to start at its absolute brightest place from the 20 plus kilohertz region and then work again down. Remember, this visual is where your frequency is going to end up. So it works its way back to wherever you've set it to. Notice with this example, I've got my attack pretty much all the way down and quite a long release. So again, all about experimentation. But there is a couple of stock Ableton plugins that I've left off that we're able to sidechain. So let me show you that now. I'm going to turn Shaper Box off for a minute, but remember, we are going to come back to that. There's a reason I've included it in this list. Now there's a couple of other plugins that you're able to sidechain. One of them is the glue compressor. It's going to work extremely similar to just the standard compressor, but the thing to note is that our threshold only goes to -40 dB. So this is a really subtle way to just get some clarity in your mix. Have a little listen, it's super subtle. So you can probably hear it taking effect there. I've got my ratio set to 10:1, my release set to 2, and my attack set to 1. So it's taking effect extremely quickly and it's releasing extremely quickly as well. Another really exciting way to use the sidechain, although I haven't experimented with it too much myself, is to use the multi-band dynamics. So with this, you're of course turning on sidechain, you're choosing kick as we do every single time. And I've actually turned the low band frequency off, so we're left with just these 2 bands here. And I've rolled the high end frequency down to about 900, 600 hertz, something like that. So we're clearly separating the low frequencies from the higher frequencies. I make sure that we've got this bracket icon and I'm pulling both the bands down to the left side. When you hover inside the rectangles, you get this vertical arrow. If we pull it into a downwards direction, it goes like a dark red, mauve kind of color. And if we start to push it up, you'll see that it will kind of go, I think that's green or blue. And this is essentially our threshold. And as we increase that, you'll hear the sidechain take effect. See if you can hear what's going on with this example. So you're kind of given a rule of which direction you're forcing the sidechain to go. So you can see that this is being ducked by -34 decibels, but this is being pushed by like +18 decibels. And we can invert that as well. So now we have kind of a classic sidechain feel, but it's a lot boomier in the bass region. So that's another great way to experiment with the multi-band dynamics. If you didn't know that you could use one of these devices for sidechain, make sure you hit that like button because it greatly helps out the channel and it lets me know that you want to see more helpful content like this. But I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's a reason why I don't tend to gravitate towards the stock Ableton compressor for my sidechain. I tend to use a third-party volume shaper. And what I mean by that is like Cable Guy's volume shaper or something like the LFO tool. Both of these plugins are going to have the ability to send MIDI signal, which is extremely important. Let's have a look why. When you use a standard sidechain compressor like the one built in with Ableton, you're going to be changing the frequency of the kick drum each time it's heard. I'll give you an example. We're going to open up a new track, a new audio track, and we're just going to solo our music. And I'm going to resample that onto a new track. So you might have been able to hear these really tiny clicks and pops. And when we solo this, you can see that when that kick takes place, we're still getting a little bit of audio. So that click is adding to your kick drum. And as we go down to the next bar where there might be another kick drum, you can hear that that's a lower frequency. And this leads me to the reason as to why I use the volume shaper. On the volume shaper, this allows me to design my own volume shape for the sidechain. Also shows me the audio being ducked there, which is really nice. And you can see that I've selected half the length. The only thing that I've done after this is choose a MIDI trigger. So most of the time that I'm doing this in my drums, I've got my kick either in a drum rack or in a sampler track. So here it's in a sampler track, just this one long track here. and here's my kick drum. You may not realize, but if you haven't opened this tab where you can delay your sounds by milliseconds, you're probably using the compressor inaccurately. With the MIDI trigger set to on and one shot, I can create this new track, which you can see down here, and you might have wondered, what is the mute send? Well, I'm taking the audio from the kick as we would in a sidechain, and I'm sending that MIDI signal to my track called Medium, and inside that track is the shaper box. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to want to choose this option here to add delay to that particular track. And with that particular track, anywhere between -4, -7 milliseconds is going to cut off that audio perfectly at the point that you want to cut it off. So let's take this down to like -7 milliseconds and just record that in and see if it works. Look at that, there's no overlap where the note finishes back here. We're getting a completely blank region until the volume takes place here. So now every time that kick drum plays, you're just getting the pure kick drum audio. Now, I do understand if you don't want to shell out any more money for an external plugin, you've just bought Ableton 11, which is such a big fee. Maybe you're using Ozone 9 and Serum. You might not want to spend more cash on a volume shaper just to send a MIDI signal. So what I would suggest doing is duplicating your drum layer and using this second kick as the send. And with this send, you're going to want to mute that track, go to the delay here, and again, bring that down to maybe -7 milliseconds. This will be your send, but this will be the audible kick. And you should get similar results. So there we have it, guys. How did you enjoy this super in-depth look at the possibilities of sidechain? Do let me know in the comments below if I missed anything off and what sidechain effect you're looking forward to using most in your next project. As always, guys, anything that I mentioned in this video or previous can be found in the description below, and that includes our Patreon, Discord, and Spotify playlists. As always, guys, I thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.